Okay, so in this video, let's take some of what we've been learning and put it together to do a problem, or we'll do two problems actually. Okay, so we're going to work with this phylogeny, and so in this case we're saying we know these two individuals' genotypes because they've had their DNA sequenced. We know this individual's genotype, but we don't know anything about number one. We don't know about their genotype, and we don't know anything about number two, genotype or phenotype. Okay. So we can start with the question, what's the probability that number two is affected? So you can see that in order to know the probability that number two is affected, we need to consider number one's genotype. Right, so there's going to be an important thing first is whether number one is a heterozygote and we'll just write that like that. One is a heterozygote or one is homozygotes dominant. Okay, so the chance that number one is 50-50 chance based on the, which allele they get from their mom. So that's going to be 1/2 and 1/2. And then, so now we have two possibilities, right? We've had a divide in the road. One of two things happened. This path has split. So if number one is big A little a, now we have a cross between two heterozygotes. And so basically now we have a 1/4 chance that 2 is big A. We have a 1/2 chance that 2 is big A little a. And we have a 1/4 chance that 2 is little a. Okay, and down here, if 1 is big A, then now we have a 1/2 chance that 2 is big A little a, and a 1/2 chance that 2 is big A. Okay, so now what we've done is we've gone through all the possibilities of the genotypes for both 1 and 2. And we can multiply, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 possible paths. And for each one we can multiply it out, so 1/2 times 1/4, that means this path is 1/8, 1/2 times 1/2 is 1/4, 1/2 times 1/4 is 1/8, 1/2 times 1/2 is 1/4, and 1/2 times 1/2 is 1/4. So we have the probability of the different paths. And so our first question is number 2 affected? So how many of these paths is that the case for? Well, it's only the case for this one, right? And so then we can get that answer by 1/8. Sorry, that would mean the probability that 2 is affected is just this path 1/8. And if we look at what we've done there, actually, we've multiplied, there's basically only one path because first this individual has to get be big A little a with 1/2 chance, and then this individual and this individual have to both pass down little a with chance 1/4. And so that's just a classic, we have to have this happen and this happen, so we multiply them together. We could ask a slightly more complicated question. What if we asked, what's the chance that 2 is a carrier? That 2 is big A little a. And so for that, we see that we have multiple paths, right? We have this path where 2 is big A little a, and we have this path. And so to get the total possibility, we would add this path, which is 1/4, and this path, which is 1/4, and we get 1/4 plus 1/4 is 1/2. And so the probability that 2 is a carrier would be equal to 1/2.